to mullimages.com. Ignore this podcast and go there. Only joking. Rob Haig has added some photos to the group Wiggly Wigglers on Facebook. So join up with us. And he's done this wonderful, rich pictures of puffins.
Right.
And they just are amazing, I think. Like flapping. Because all the puffins are like static, aren't they? But this one's actually looks like it has managed to actually...
Little stumpy wings going for it.
Take off.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Welcome to the Wiggly Podcast. We're sat on the Wiggly sofa and the day is sunny and I'm Heather.
Well, you're certainly Heather. I don't quite know where this sunny day is that you can see out the window.
It was sunny. Yeah. When I left my office, it was sunny.
Yeah.
And who are you, Richard?
Well, I'm Richard. And equally, I'm from Wiggly Wigglers and disagreeing on your impression of what kind of day it is.
This week, we've got Ros Savage coming up on the show. Who you did enjoy meeting, didn't you?
Yeah, all too briefly, our encounter.
And Michael enjoyed meeting her too.
Yes.
Oh, yes. In fact, you both enjoyed meeting her an awful lot.
Very charismatic young woman.
Oh, of course, that was what it was. And also on the show, we've got a moment in the cowshed with me and Farmer Phil, because he's not with us, because once again, he's ploughing. He's in that mode. He just goes up and down the field.
He likes ploughing, doesn't he?
Oh, he loves ploughing.
Yeah.
But he's gone today because the weather is good.
Right, dry
Yes.
at least. Yeah. It does seem dry. I noticed the river's dropping down a bit, which is quite nice. Not to see it spewing all over the banks or just shimmering beneath the levels of the banks.
And the reason that we're going out into the cowshed, because Rob Haig, who's done this brilliant website, says this. Congratulations on reaching 1,000 on the Facebook site. Well, we're now at 1,068. And the Dell thing. Everyone refers to it as the Dell thing because nobody quite knows what it was.
No.
And I feel the same myself, but it was good.
Yeah.
And he says, by the way, what has happened to Farmer Phil and the cows? We haven't had a cow yard cast for ages. Cheers, Rob. So there we are. Instant reaction. Got it this morning. Went out to the cows with Farmer Phil. Let's hear what's going on before breakfast for the cows. You're with me and Farmer Phil outside the cowshed, and we're going in, Farmer Phil, we're going in.
We're going to see what they're up to this morning.
Oh, and I'm greeted by a lying down 63 who is now getting up in big style and having a stretch and a poop. That's very down to earth, Farmer Phil.
Here's Abigail, who is still a pain.
Oh, hello, Abigail. So what have we got in here? Because we've got all sizes. We've got furry little calves who are very furry. Is that because it's cold?
Yeah.
Or?
What you've got here are the 25 or so cows who, for a variety of reasons, have got younger calves that they've calved later.
Ah, this is the Phil cock-up.
Well, it may be.
It's
what the more commercial cattle breeders would say, I should have culled them for various reasons. But what we try and do is, if they've got a valid reason for not having a calf, i.e. that something went wrong or they weren't very well or whatever, then we put it right and accept the fact that we'll have a younger calf. And actually, it's not all wrong, because it means that we have a proportion of the herd which is autumn calving, which gives us some calves to sell in the spring, which sometimes can be a good thing, selling them to go out to grass.
Now, hang on a second, because I've been talking to various people about how one should run one's herd of cattle, and Charlie Walker, I know, would be saying, hang on a minute, Farmer Phil, this is not a commercial enterprise. And I know the chap next to me at the NFU dinner, very nice chap, would have said, no, this is not using the genes correctly. What you need to do is you need to go for the strongest possible cattle. The moment that there's a problem, they don't get in calf, then you cull them. And that is because then you get a very... Oh, at my bum goes out, Abigail pushing her head. Then you get a strong herd, and you're not constantly fiddling about with your carving aid and pottering about and pretending, that you are needed. Has she got an itchy head?
No, she's just a pain.
Right. I'll scratch her ears.
Well, they're partly right, but the point is that at the moment, heifers, so replacement cattle, are vastly expensive. In a closed herd situation where you keep your heifer calves as breeding replacements, then I wouldn't keep any breeding replacements from this bunch of cattle.
Right, now hang on. What's a heifer and what's a breeding replacement?
A heifer is a young female cow.
Who hasn't had a calf.
Who hasn't had a calf. And so that we could, and we are starting to this year, to keep some of our Angus cross heifers as replacements for cows in the future. But you wouldn't want to keep them out of this group, because this group may have some questions about fertility or whatever. And so, Adin, that's a bit forward of you.
Who's that?
That's Adin the bull.
Oh. He's not wanting a bit while we're having breakfast,
Well, I think he's probably having a bit while we're having breakfast.
Good Lord. We won't go into the details of what's happening now, dear listener, but suffice to say, he's enjoying himself.
But the point is that there may be a question mark over the fertility of some of these cows, so that we wouldn't keep a heifer out of these cows for that reason. And that's what they're on about, that you should keep stock out of the best stock, the most fertile stock, and so on. But from my point of view, these cattle all pretty regularly have a calf, and their own calving interval is about right.
Yes, but I know that you're out here helping out with your, it looks like a wallpaper brush, every time they calve. And they would say, no, Farmer Phil, let nature be. If the cow doesn't calve naturally, cull the cow.
That is what they say, but there are not many cattle farmers in this country who, including them, who will do that.
But you always intervene.
I don't always intervene.
You do.
No, that's not
mostly
fair.
You do.
No, you don't. I don't do that. I would think I actually help less than 10% of them.
Is that right?
That is right, yes.
I'll believe you. Now, listen, one last question to address before I go off and talk to Australia. You know how it is in my schedule. Now, the New Zealanders would say, you silly old Billy, you've brought these cattle into this shed. You're more likely to get pneumonia. You're more likely to get disease because, of course, they're in a space that they've got plenty of room, but they're in a tighter space than in the field. On the ground is straw, which obviously they poop on. They're eating from the same feed containers. Silly old Billy, let them out into the field. And that, to me, would seem a wonderful idea, because then it would be less intensive, more extensive, and they would just corral an area, put some wood chip down, and enjoy their life as a New Zealand farmer, having cups of tea.
Well, I've not been to New Zealand, but I understand the climate in New Zealand is somewhat different to here.
It's supposed to be similar.
I know my land, and I know that if these cattle were out on those fields, that they would be up to their guts in mud, and they would be losing condition fast, particularly the older ones.
Any sniffing is Abigail in the microphone. Go away.
If you put these cattle out in Herefordshire on our land, it will end in tears, and it will end in tears in a number of ways. The older cattle,
Farmer Phil.
The older cattle suffer very quickly from just having to struggle with the mud, whereas we can put them in a well-ventilated shed like this. We don't have problems with pneumonia in these modern sheds. As you can see, the one side of the shed is completely open to the air. It's sunny, it's light, and it's airy. And these cattle will go down to Campston in a minute with their calves, and they will actually be put into a shed which has got a lot more space. That also helps to avoid problems with pneumonia and disease. So that, from my point of view, if I could sensibly manage them outside, I would, because it's all work in here. But the point is that if I put them outside, there'll be no grass in the spring. I'll have a field that looks like a moonscape, and I'll have to get rid of half of them because they won't cope with the conditions that I'm trying to keep them in.
Nobody's listening, Farmer Phil. Not a soul. Are you secretly a corn baron or a cow farmer?
Both, I think.
Oh, a mixed farmer. You're in fashion. Goodbye. So, Rich, moo to you.
Moo.
Yeah.
You've got this moo thing, I've noticed. I asked you what the card was the other day that you were getting a little bit excited about, and you said it's moo. What does moo stand for?
It's a website called moo.com where you can go and do your own photos and produce your own business cards.
Okay.
And there's a little special moment for podcast listeners. If you email me, I will send you one of my moo cards.
All right.
Because you haven't got it yet.
No,
I haven't done
no,
yours yet.
No, you keep these things secret from me, don't you? You find out these little things and then you drop them in occasionally.
I do. If you email me, I'll send you a little moo card wherever you are, and there'll be a little message from me on there, a little deal to be done.
Right.
But this moo card is my favourite, which I'm going to keep forever.
And they print these things up. You can go to this website and they print them as well, do they?
Yeah, have a look.
So you just the whole package, you do it, fill it in, and you get it back in a little box of cards.
Yeah, I only went there because I felt moo was to do with cows.
Yeah.
You know, so
moo. Yeah, your affinity for all things bovine-like.
Exactly. What a great website name. Right. Anyway, but look at this one. Read what it says.
Okay, read what it says. It does say on the top, congratulations for your award. Continued success from Alvin Hall, nonetheless.
Oh!
So, for the benefit of the listener, who is Alvin Hall?
Well, he does this thing called Alvin Hall's Wheels of Money on the telly, but I listen to him on Radio 4.
Right.
And he does a programme about dosh and stuff, and
right.
the stock market. He was a stockbroker on the New York Stock Exchange.
Okay.
And he says things like, if this was your money, Heather, it would be this big if it was a cake. And he said to me, oh, it's so lovely to meet you, Heather. And I was thinking, oh, does he think that? Because in the airport, this diva drifted through with some minders, and I thought, who's that? So I asked who that was, ready to go up to and say hello in my way.
Yeah.
And I don't know who it was. But the chap opposite said, there's Alvin Hall.
Right.
Have I told you this story?
No, you haven't.
I've probably told you this story 100 times, but I've told everyone. I bet I've said this on the podcast 100 times.
No.
Anyway, there he was in the queue, in this gorgeous camel coat.
Right.
And Sam and Rachel sat there, and I just got up, and they went, no. And I went up to him, and he was on his phone, so I waited, politely.
Yeah.
And I said, Alvin, my name's Heather. I said, I just have to tell you that I listened to your show on Radio 4, and when you went round all those different banks, Lehman Brothers and all those things, and interviewed those people, it was really moving. Because it was. And he said, oh, thank you so much. Thank you. That's very kind of you to say that. And I said, I'm Heather from Wiggly Wigglers. And he said, Wiggly Wigglers, what do you do? And I said, well, we do this wormy thing. He said, why are you going to New York? And I said, well, we've won this Dell thing. And he said, oh, that's amazing. I'll look you up on the internet. He was lovely.
Right.
And I went back, and the others they got their heads in their hands. They were so embarrassed of me. Yeah. But I thought, sometimes...
Oh, you've got to do that sort of thing.
You've got to take a chance. You've learnt me that, Rich.
I've learnt you that. Have I really? Well, that's quite encouraging.
Me that.
Absolutely. That's really good. Well, I'm glad that's the case.
I've got that.
If that's a contribution I've made to your general demeanour and behavioural patterns, and that's the thing that I'm proud of achieving.
If you could just learn me English... Teach me English. If I could just find out how to speak English.
Well done. Yeah, well, there you are, you see. So opportunity, sort of, you're omnipresent now in his mindset. And if you hadn't have gone up there, of course, then you wouldn't have been a feature in his psychology at all.
Wow. Listen, I want to know about rats in the garden, because there's a moment in time where the Wiggly Wigglers email is rat infested, and that moment is now.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got rats. Oh, how do we deal with this? This is the most dreadful thing. We're going to die of rats any second now. Yeah. Is it just Wiggly customers? Are we causing a rat issue?
Well, we've got one of the Facebook discussion topics is about rats as well, I noticed, and I kind of had a squiz the other day, and it reminded me of a nice little story from my dodgy youth when I was working down in North Devon on a fishery, and I think I was probably mowing around the lake. And I found a rat's nest, as you do. Inside this rat's nest were all these tiny, fairly newborn, bald, pink, blind little rats.
James Herbert.
Yeah, so So I bent down and gently picked these things up and threw them into the lake, as you do, right? But that wasn't the funniest bit. I mean, perhaps I'd be slightly low. No, I'd probably still do the same thing now, actually. But the funniest thing was the next day we went out and we used to net we used to get full of blanket weed, filamentous algae, and we used to net that with a seine net to take it out.
A seine net?
A seine net, yeah. Long net that you pull around in the shape of a crescent, you know.
Oh, I know.
And then you pull it onto the back, pulls the weed out. And every time we did that, we always used to catch eels because they'd get entangled into the blanket weed. And so we would keep the eels, skin them, and eat them. So, of course, we had a couple of eels that following day, and I gutted them and found those baby rats inside the eels that I gutted, which is kind of weird. And so I remember a rat story just popped into my
I do hope you're not eating your tea, and if you are, that it's not anything wiggly like octopus or anything.
But I did a talk last night, and again, everybody wanted to talk about rats. It's just the time of year, you know, they're moving out of the countryside and they're looking for warm refuge, so they're trying to get into compost heaps and people's sheds and things like that for the winter. Now, last night someone was telling me about how she thought that all her song thrushes had lost their clutches because of a rat infestation they had this year, which is quite likely, and her dog was going round and round this bush, really, really interested in this bush, and she couldn't see what it was that the dog was really interested in until she looked up kind of head height, and there was a song thrush's nest there, and inside the song thrush's nest was this rat curled up, just kind of sleeping in the song thrush's nest. So and this was back in the summer, so the thing had probably gone in there and feasted on all the eggs and thought, oh, you know, have a sleep now. So yeah, there's every chance that the rats would wipe out colonies.
But what have you got
nests.
in for them? You know, there would be an argument to say they're all part of the natural ecosystem. I mean, I hate them myself.
They probably are. I can't really think of
any good
why rats are significant ecologically. I think we could probably do without them, to be perfectly honest. I don't think they would make a huge difference if we didn't have brown rats. But they are hideous to the extent that they do spread bad diseases, and they reckon that a large proportion of the population now carry Bars disease, leptospirosis, which is a virus. And a couple of friends of mine have had leptospirosis, both of whom were really, really ill. And the one guy, he was putting out his bin bags one day, or at least this is how the doctor thinks he contracted leptospirosis, and there was probably some rat's urine on the top of the bin bag, and he got it into an abrasion or cut on his hand, and he was really, really ill, hospitalised ill, wanting to die ill, because it's like proper flu, influenza, not bad cold flu, but 10 times
not
worse.
Not man flu.
No, not man flu.
No.
It's particularly unpleasant, and there's a real chance that if you've got very moist compost, that virus can say if it dries out, it will die. But it can stay alive in solution for a long, long time. So
wildlife lover and biodiversity enthusiast and jolly good chap, Richard, are you advocating automatic shotgun?
Yes, yeah. Well, the problem with rats, of course, as well, is that they're very cunning. So, I do absolutely. I think there's only one good rat, and that is a dead one, in much the same way as cats. Oh no, did I say that? Sorry, I don't want to get into that subject. Oh, I do apologise. I just slipped out. Sorry. Anyway,
if we could just keep on the subject, because of course cats do control
people
rats.
Say, how do you? To a point, but it's often rats are far too big for cats. And
keep to the point.
They're cowardly, aren't they, cats? So they don't usually like to face their enemy. So anyway, but no, back to the whole rat thing. People want to use poison to kill rats, and unfortunately, poison is kind of indiscriminate.
Oh,
so
that was the answer. Did you hear the cat?
Yeah, no, just put in his peneth in.
Yeah, here we come.
Difficult one, rats. But
he's going straight over to Richard,
and all sorts of things.
Just coming up on the sofa.
There we go. Yeah, hello, Noah. Isn't that weird? But at least he's come to you instead of me. He will come to me in a minute, just out of spite.
Yeah. So listen, not everyone's going around with a shotgun in the kitchen like Farmer Phil. Not that it's obviously locked up in the cabinet with a full licence. Thank you very much, the police authorities. Poison's the easy option.
Yeah, poison's the easy option. But live traps, where you can put a little bit of food in there. They do work, but they tend to only work when there's no other food around. So if you're trying to catch your rats, stop feeding the birds for that moment in time, or stop putting foodstuffs in your compost heap so that they don't have a readily available source of tasty treats. You know, the tastiest treat is inside the cage trap.
But listen, Rich, you know, for my part, rats really give me the heebie-jeebies. You know, I would be as likely to catch a live rat as fly to the moon. Yeah. Because I would just be scared, just witless.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's not going to... I mean, most people can't bear to do that. Is it just we got to get over it? Or?
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, it's just, I think...
I mean, I've seen Jodie chop a rat's head off with a spade.
Right.
No, I mean, she went up in my estimation, big style.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that is a woman with substance.
Yes, absolutely.
But I would have by now run to Hereford.
Right, okay. Yeah, no, they are unpleasant things, and they're just something about them. I mean, I've had several at home this year, and I hope Sarah doesn't listen to this, because if she says, have we got rats, I say, no. And but they get in the compost heap just below the chicken run, and it's got a nice warm place, and then you can see the little runs. And what I do is take a fen trap, put them on the runs, make a tunnel out of some old off-cut boards so that nothing else can get in there, and put the fen trap on the run and they're suckers for tunnels, you know, because they like to go in dark,
and the
enclosed
advantage
spaces.
of a fen trap is it's ready dead then.
Yeah, it's dead, that's right, it's dead. It's kind of, in many respects, fen traps are sort of more humane than humane traps. Yeah. They work very well, but there is a knack of, we don't supply them because there is a kind of knack of using them, and there is every chance that you could really hurt your hands if you sprung a fen trap on your hands.
So for the less adventurous...
Yeah.
Then, you know, for the Heathers in this world who really don't want to face this problem, should we get our pest controller in but say don't use poison, use traps? Is that the answer?
Yeah, you can do that, definitely, because the local authority, I mean, the guy that comes here, he does various things, but also he puts down little nipper mouse traps and fen traps to catch rats. You know, if he sees where rats are running regularly, he'll put a fen trap down in a tunnel, cover it over so nothing else can get in there apart from the rat that'll squeeze its way through. That's definitely possible. If you've got, you can ring a local authority and ask for pest control, or they will have a list of pest controllers.
And lastly, the compost heap. You must have put off everyone now, all around the world, from having a compost heap because it's warm, and that's where the rats will shelter. Yeah. So could you just fix Wiggly Wiggler's business back?
Right. Well, compost heaps are hugely important for everything. I mean, this is everything likes to make its home in a compost heap because it's warm, it's relatively watertight. You've got what is essentially a 3-foot thatch above your head, you know, when you're in the bottom of it. And you can't just have a compost heap because there is a chance that you may get rats in there. If you've got rats in your compost heap, you know, lift your compost heap, don't add foodstuffs to it, you know, move it around, things like that, and the rats will definitely vacate the premises then.
And can of worms, you've got to give a plug for can of worms because you don't get rats in your
No, you don't. That's the thing with worm, is it? They're great things in that respect because they're above the ground, completely rodent-proof. You know what? I've never heard of an instance of anybody having problems from rodents or even foxes or anything like that. That keep a can of worms.
Not me, but I've no doubt this week will be the week. Listen, on Facebook, if anyone's not joined our Facebook group, go along, because we're now at lots and lots of members. There's a thing called Wiggly Office Quote of the Day. And before we go to Ros Savage, I just wanted to ask you about this particular one. It says, Karen says, phone call, Rich, the bad news is one of your buildings is falling down. Richard, oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, well, I think it was last week. I just came. I'd been out setting up bits and bobs for a local place that having an open day on the weekend. I got back into the office, and Karen quite literally said that. Oh, Richard, Sarah's been trying to get hold of you. One of your buildings is falling down. And I said, oh, that's all right, because I knew which one she was talking about. What happened is I'd taken down a lean-to on the end of the cottage, and I'm going to rebuild it and create a nice den and nookie and things like that. Of course, I'd taken down the guts of the building, the main frame, and left just the facade, you know.
Like a cowboy film.
Front. Yeah, pretty much like that, exactly like that, because I hadn't really had much support. And unfortunately, Mary's mum comes over, and when she comes over, she brings over a bag of her shredded envelopes and paper to feed to my worms, right? So she unwittingly opened the door to go into the shed with her, because there was nothing in it. There was just these big old elm boards, fat red boards on the front. So she goes in and opens the door, and the whole thing leans towards her. And the only thing that kept it upright was the fact that the door had swung open and it was kind of jamming at right angles to this front of this building. Because really, it could have been curtains for Mary.
It's that scene of the shed folding in with her stood in the middle of the door.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what... Well, I mean, that would have been... If that had happened, that would have been relatively entertaining. And...
I'm sure it would have been.
But it could have gone either way, and she may well have been caught behind the door, in which case it would have been curtains. I'd have been picking up flat mother-in-law from the Folly. So I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yes, yet another accident at the Folly.
So the women of the Folly propped up the front of the thing, and quite literally in the morning. Because the reason I kept it there is because we've got a guest stay in the cottage, you see.
Oh, yeah, so we could kill them.
Aesthetically pleasing. So when they go up there, they see that, they don't see like a mixer and, sort of blocks and things like that. They just see this thing. Of course, in the morning, I noticed that the people had gone out, and so I went out there and quite literally kicked the supports away from the front of it, and the whole lot just went... and on the floor, and I took it apart, and
unfortunately, Mary was stood right in front of the building. Here we have Montys Montycast, a Wiggly fact on wiggliness.
Montycast, a weekly fact on wiggliness. Burying bokashi compost in the garden will supply plants with a nourishing food source and condition the soil with enriching microbes. Another Montycast, a weekly fact on wiggliness. Next week.
Thank you, Monty. I was supposed to be on the ITN news last night. They cut it.
That's a shame, isn't it?
What a shame. They said it wasn't as good news as the other news. Oh, what a shame. Here we are, Rich.
Right.
Ros Savage turned up and met you last week.
Gorgeous Ros.
Yeah.
She did,
and you gave me a very naughty stare of go away, Heather. What was that about, Rich?
I don't think it's a shame, really. Is Ross coming back at all? Is she going to come back to Blakemere for future conversations? Or
I don't know, Rich. Why?
Probably not. Well, if she does, I think perhaps she should be out that day.
Anyway, Ross came to talk to me because she was doing this mastermind thing with Australis Media, which I've been doing this morning and will do tonight. But it turned out that she was much more interested than I was, obviously. And so I interviewed her because she actually has given up her job and has become an environmental campaigner.
Yeah.
And the way that she raises awareness is to get off her butt or get onto her butt and row across oceans.
Yeah, pretty formidable stuff.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing stuff, yeah.
And she has rowed across the Atlantic and she's in the middle of rowing across the Pacific, but of course she pops home a bit. She does stage by stage on the Pacific.
Yeah.
So here we go. Here's Ros on the Wiggly sofa. Dear Wiggly listener, every now and again a little moment happens at Wiggly Wigglers. Something little strange happens. And the other day a lady emailed me and she said she was called Ros and that I must read this email because she had rowed across the Atlantic. And I thought, I must read this email. This woman has rowed across the Atlantic. And now she's sat on the Wiggly sofa. And I think she's probably 7 stone or something.
I wish, no. Considerably more than that. Certainly considerably more than I was when I arrived in Hawaii 3 months ago.
Let me feel your muscles. Now, why have you rowed across the Atlantic, you lunatic? Did the sea take you and you just sat in the boat?
That's it. I was just sitting there on the beach one day. Next thing I knew, I'm out in the middle of the ocean. What's a girl to do but carry on rowing? No, I suppose it was a bit of an early midlife crisis. I'd worked in an office for 11 years. And
no windows?
Not many windows, just lots of cubicles, grey cubicles, all rather depressing. And so I just really felt like there had to be something more interesting to do with my life, and rather through a series of events rather than a sudden epiphany, decided that rowing across oceans was going to be that more interesting thing.
Had you a history of this problem?
No, I seemed quite normal for many years. My mother was very happy. She could sleep well at nights. But I just got fed up with doing this job I didn't like to buy stuff I didn't need. I went through actually quite a period of soul searching, because when I realised that all this stuff that I'd worked all my life to acquire didn't actually make me happy, it was like I had to overhaul my entire value system. It was like, well, if things aren't the path to happiness, then what is? And a very key phrase that I read in a book by a one-legged Welsh sailor was, the only true riches in life are to be found between your ears. So I decided that in order to build up those riches, I suppose, it would be good to take on some kind of character-building challenge. And the place where I was in my life at that stage, I'd also become a bit of a born-again environmentalist. So whatever I did, I wanted it to be environmentally low impact. So
in fact, you just refused a Wiggly catalogue, haven't you? And I felt quite proud of you.
Well, I'm glad you weren't offended.
Not at all.
Yes, I'm a homeless nomad these days, so I try not to acquire stuff. And my immediate thought when you offered me the catalogue was, I wonder where the next recycling bin's going to be, because I wanted to look through it.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, it's probably available online, and I'd love to look at it there, and then it saves me the hassle of trying to find a recycling bin. And also, it's just better to reduce rather than to recycle, because recycle has got so many costs in itself and has a significant carbon footprint. So I'm so glad that you didn't take offence at that.
Not at all. In fact, if there's any Wiggly customers out there who hate receiving their catalogues, you just give us a ring and we'll be happy to take you off the list. Of course, for those of you, like me, who read it in the bath, what you need to do is, when you're fed up of it, pass it on to a friend or take it to the library or put it in the doctor's surgery. It's entertainment in the doctor's surgery, I know, because when I go to the doctors, there's always one of ours in there. Now, listen,
That's
Ross.
an excellent idea.
Yeah, listen, Ross. So you set off on this journey.
Yes, I did the Atlantic 3 years ago, and now I'm just 1/3 of the way through my mega project, which is to row alone across the Pacific. And I'm doing this in 3 stages. So this summer just gone, I rowed from San Francisco, set out under the Golden Gate Bridge, and I rowed to Hawaii, which took me 99 days. And that stage of the row was all about the North Pacific garbage patch and all this plastic that's getting into the oceans and getting into our seafood and ultimately ending up on our dinner plates. And that's not really what you want to be eating.
So when you row, you're also communicating a message.
That was why the rowing was such a perfect project for me, was because I felt at that stage in my life, when I made this rather bizarre decision, that I was starting to get a few things figured out that were making me personally feel a bit happier with my life. That I was placing less emphasis on stuff and more on just the person that I was. I also found that it made me feel good just to live with more respect for the environment. It just seemed intuitively right to live that way. And so one of the reasons that rowing across oceans seemed really perfect was because it is a bit of an attention grabber, and it does give me an opportunity to communicate with people, which I do through my blogs and my podcasts and my videos, a bit like you do with Wiggly Wigglers. And I definitely try not to preach at people. I just say, well, here's some stuff that I've tried out, both on the environmental side but also on the psychological side, those little life lessons, because rowing across an ocean is really, really hard. When I first set out across the Atlantic 3 years ago, I was literally and metaphorically so far out of my depth. I really struggled with those little negative voices in my head, those voices of self-doubt and fear and, oh my word, what was I thinking, and I should just get back to my office cubicle and forget about this crazy idea. Unfortunately, when you set out to row across an ocean, I set out from the Canaries, and the trade winds there mean that basically once you set out, you can't change your mind and turn around and row back again because the wind's blowing you too strongly towards the Caribbean. So pretty much I was a prisoner on my own boat, and I just had to figure out how I was going to deal with this mentally without going totally crazy in mid-ocean. And it was a very, very steep learning curve, but I really did learn a lot out there. Those those are little life lessons. I do some motivational speaking now. I really enjoy just telling my stories to people, and a lot of them find something really useful to take home with them and apply it to their own challenges, whether that's the challenge of parenting or running a small business or running a marathon or whatever. Occasionally people say, you know what, Ros, you said something really sensible there.
How long did it take you to get over those self-doubting moments, you know, when you were out there? I mean, gosh, 24 hours on your own. You see, the reason I asked you what you had for tea was because I would be thinking, I know, what is my next meal going to be?
Absolutely. I spent a lot of time thinking about food out there. It did become quite an obsession. Part of the reason that rowing across oceans appealed so much was because I thought, woohoo, I'll be able to eat 5,000 calories a day. I'll be able to eat as much as I want. But unfortunately, I sort of overlooked the fact I wouldn't be able to eat what I wanted. So I'm out there in the middle of the ocean with a massive ice cream craving, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Has it made you much more self-disciplined then?
In some ways, I've always been fairly self-disciplined. In fact, maybe now I'm in some ways less disciplined, because now I'm a bit more go with the flow of things, where I used to be very much a woman with a plan, and I had my blinkers on and I was just heading straight for that goal. And now I think I'm a bit more open to opportunities. I've taken the blinkers off and I've realised that there's a lot of really good stuff going on around me and a lot of good opportunities trying to present themselves to me when I'm not just so obsessed with that one very specific goal.
Now, I know you're an environmentalist and you're very keen on getting that message out.
Actually, I hesitate to call myself an environmentalist because there are so many people who know so much more about the environment than I do. I'm just a very concerned layperson that actually wants to live on a nice clean planet when I'm 80 years old. And the way we're heading at the moment, we're not quite heading in the right direction. So if I can do my little bit to try and haul us back on track and try and preserve this planet as best we can, then that's what I'm trying to do.
If you're sitting at home now, dear listener, and thinking, well, that's unbelievable, you know, there's no way that I would give up my home and, you know, life to go and row across the Atlantic. That's exactly what I'm thinking myself. But
it's not the obvious path to happiness, I suppose.
But is there something key that you've learnt from that? You know, have we all gone mad so that we've got too structured a day? If there was some little thing that you would say to me or to that listener that could alter what we think, what would it be? What have you found from this experience? Because we all can't go rowing around the world.
It would get really crowded out there on the ocean.
Yeah.
One thing that I found very empowering for me personally is that no challenge is too big to be accomplished when you break it down into tiny little pieces. So, for example, to row from San Francisco to Hawaii took me about 1 million oar strokes, 100 days roughly, at about 10,000 strokes a day. And if I'd have stood under the Golden Gate Bridge and said, well, 1 oar stroke isn't going to make any difference, then I wouldn't have got anywhere. But you take lots of tiny little actions and you put them all together and it makes a really huge difference. And I like to take that and apply it to the environment as well, because I think sometimes I personally feel overwhelmed by all the bad news about the environment, and it's easy to think we're all doomed and there's nothing I can do that's really going to help. But I think if we really all pull together and we all do our own little bit, then it really does accumulate. And I think that, for me, that was a really powerful lesson. And I apply it to all kinds of things. Like, I've just finished writing my book about the Atlantic Row, which is going to come out next year.
What's it called?
Oh,
quick plug.
Oh my God. Well, actually, if you go to my website today, we're doing an online survey because the title of the book has become very controversial. We've got like 6 contenders at the moment. So I'm asking people to vote on the title of the book.
What's the favourite at the moment?
At the moment, it's other, which means a lot of people have been coming up with their own ideas. But at the moment, I would say Notes from a Small Boat has got a narrow lead over Savage Solo.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. So,
not one woman in a boat.
No. Somebody wanted my agent, who I hope never listens to this podcast, wanted to call it Rowing Alone Across the Atlantic, which I'm afraid made me want to shoot myself.
Oh dear, I think you should sack him. Thanks, Ros, very much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to meet you, and what an inspiration. I can almost feel another bike ride coming on. Oh no. If you want to know more about Ros, go to www.rozzsavage.com. Till next week, Ricardo.
Until next week, young Heather.
Bye.
Bye-bye.